The offseason is certainly upon Major League Soccer as well. We spoke a little bit about CF Montreal, their new boss, yesterday. On today's program, we're going to talk a little bit about Toronto FC as we go a little east to west for our Canadian MLS clubs. They had their media day yesterday as they prepared to get ready for their training camp heading south to avoid, well, I look out my window right now and see snow in Toronto. Can't blame them for heading somewhere a little bit warmer. And of course, John Herdman was going to be asked about, is it the two-headed monster? Is that what we're going with? Certainly, you can't even call it the elephant in the room. Maybe it's the Italian elephants in the room, because that was the question heading into the offseason. Would they stay? Would they go? What's the update on the Italians, Bernardeschi and Insigne? And he had the following to say about the very expensive duo when he spoke to ESPN and Football Americas. This was just before the media day. He was, of course, get into it, what he had to say yesterday. But the quote was, I think for those two, there's a buy-in because they want to change and they have a chance now. There's just no more excuses for any of the players there. They've had a reset. They're getting a full preseason and will work on that buy-in towards what they want. And what they want is to become top in Major League Soccer. That's where they believe they can take this club. I'm buying into their vision as much as they're buying into mine. The latter would certainly excite TFC fans there. Ollie, do you think there's a chance for this buy-in to happen, or do you believe the situation is just a little too far gone?
To quote the great Natalie Imbruglia, I'm all out of faith when it comes to TFC and this situation. I want to be wrong. I don't want to be negative here. I would love to be proven wrong this season, but I just don't know, if you're a TFC fan, if you've watched this team over the past 18 months, how you're really, truly supposed to believe in what you're going to see from Toronto FC this season. It's very difficult to buy into that commitment being real when you know, or you think you know, based on some of the things that are happening in the media in terms of the rumors that are out there and the stories that you hear that maybe don't come out of their mouth but come from certain places, that it feels like if Insigne or if Bernardeschi had the opportunity to go back to Europe or back to Italy specifically, they would do it. And you also feel like Toronto FC had a way to get out of these contracts that was viable and that wouldn't involve paying off a lot of money, that they would do that as well. So how real can that commitment be when that's the case, right? I think this team under John Herdman will be better. I think he will get more out of them to a certain extent. I find it difficult to see them being any worse or as bad as they were last season. But do I think they'll be truly successful based on the expectations we have for this club, based on the expectations that are set when you spend the amount of money they've spent? I don't know. I think it would require a truly transformational impact from John Herdman. We've seen what he's capable of with Canada. I think there's a lot of belief in him, more so than the club and the players. But it's a really, really big ask. And I think, like I said, I'll give him all the credit in the world if he can pull it off here, because I personally just don't see it with this team.
Jordan, agree?
I agree with Ollie. I can't see John Herdman turning this around, nor do I think that is solely on John Herdman. I think as a manager, you got to bring the best out of your players. But for me, again, as a player who played and just watches the body language of players and how Bernardeschi and Insigne, they have to want to be here. They have to want to go and be the best. All the lip service and talking about it and John Herdman saying that he's going to meet them where they are. Look, this is something that these players have to want. They have to want to go out and play for the badge. And it doesn't matter who you play for. You can bring the best player in the world. If you don't want to go and work for your club or work with the players that you're with, then you're not going to have a successful year. Do I think it's too far gone? I do. Do I hope good things happen this season and it's a bit of a step in the right direction? Yes. But do I think that this 2024 season for TFC could be a successful one? I do not. I think there are just too many loopholes within the squad. I think from management straight down, I think it's a bit flawed. I think going into 2023 as well as an imbalanced side, I can't say right now at the taping of the show that this squad is balanced in any way. I think there's still many deficiencies, and then you're relying on two players in football, which is a game played by 11, to maybe go and shake some things up. I just, for me, don't think that's enough. I think John Herdman, you have to be faithful or hopeful going into the situation and thinking that players can maybe be the best of themselves. But even if that were the case, I still don't think that's enough for this TFC side.
Well, from one duo to another, and the next topic I'm going to reference in particular a tweet from our pal James Sharman, or an ex-post, whatever it's called now, from James Sharman, saying John Herdman alludes to the fact that the Michael/Bob Bradley son-father dynamic was not ideal within the room and would always be a, quote, recipe for disaster, according to the players who have spoken to him about it. It caught a few people off guard, Ollie, didn't it? Where it's like, that was last year. It's just seemed like pinning blame on 2023, and I'm not sure where you think the optics of it were. Is it resetting the standard? Is it trying to really create a clean slate, saying this is a new era at TFC? It was a head scratcher. What did you end up settling on from that little line from John?
To be honest, I thought it was a little bit of a concern, a red flag, whatever you want to call it, because there's been a lot of talk about no more excuses with this TFC team, that all of that's gone now and it's time to perform. And I understand that when John Herdman says that, he's talking about the present and the future and the circumstances and the environment that he's trying to create. But I think when you talk about no more excuses, like part of that, or at least part of rebuilding trust, rebuilding faith, is taking ownership and taking responsibility for what's happened in the past and what happened last season. And that to me sounds like certain individuals still passing the buck, passing the blame off to someone else for their own problems. So look, I wasn't in the room. None of us except the players and the coaches at the time were in the room and can tell us whether that relationship between Michael and Bob Bradley was a problem. What I would say is that, firstly, that it's not the first time they've worked together. They've had success together in the past, obviously most notably with the US men's national team at a very high level at the World Cup. So they have that in their favor that they could argue from their corner. And then the second thing I'd say is that it wasn't as if this dynamic was there for the entire season. Bob Bradley was fired in June. Michael Bradley was injured for a large parts of the season. The team went 1-0-13 after Bob Bradley was fired. So, you know, again, passing the blame onto this as the reason why your designated players performed as poorly as they did, and other failures over the course of the season, it just doesn't really wash with me. And it would be a little bit of a concern to me if that's still being brought up in discussions as a big reason for last year's failures.
Joan, I want to get your thoughts on this, but if I may, I'd like to frame it this way. We know, having worked with and around John Herdman as the Canadian men's national team boss and seeing him transition into this new role, that he is the rah-rah guy. I think of a certain expletive Croatia trying to maybe deflect and take some of the pressure and spotlight away from players. In this case, as a player, if John's intent with that quip was to kind of say, we're going to take some of the onus off of what happened last year from the players, put it somewhere else, and maybe give them a pass here. As a player, if that was the intention, does that endear you to a new coach? Do you appreciate sort of the distraction from what went on the field? Or how would you gauge that if you were in the locker room?
For me personally, and I know most players, we like straight shooters. Managers who come in and say what they mean and mean what they say. I think when it comes to defending a squad or defending players, you can pick so many. I mean, Sir Alex Ferguson used to do this all the time in the press, right? When it's time to defend their players, you talk to me, you don't talk to my players, right? I think that's fine. I think John Herdman putting feelers out there to maybe deflect from the situation. For me, I always appreciated a manager saying, this is what we're going into, and just being honest and authentic. I don't really like the distraction or noise or talking about past managers or other situations. For me, if I'm looking at TFC as a fan or as a player and I'm going to work every day, I don't want to talk about the past and all the things that went wrong. I want to talk about how are we going to mend the situation? How are we going to win games? How are we going to have a footballing culture that wasn't so far off? 2017, I keep talking about it, but it seems very far off to the TFC that we see now. How can we get back to winning ways, but also that winning culture? So I wouldn't really talk about Michael Bradley. I wouldn't really talk about Bob Bradley. I'd be focusing on the task at hand, which is having a winning season. And how could they do that? I don't think it's by thinking about the past. You have to really take it in. I think players really are receptive to someone who is honest and authentic and doesn't really put out these distractions or dwells over the past. You really have to be forward thinking and thinking about the future.
And we always remember that there is the lines and quotes that the media gets to see and hear, and then there's the coach that deals with you day to day in training and in the locker room too. And you can never say with 100% certainty what the messaging is, how they've decided to deal with it in the room, and what the plan is for next year. We'll certainly keep an eye on Toronto FC as their camp opens up. It has been a remarkably quiet offseason in terms of transfers in and out. Seems like John is going with the bet on yourself that he is the man to right the ship, or at least take some strides forward as they continue to figure out where they are in the MLS landscape. Let's move on next to our Visa Women's Soccer Report. Presented by Visa, our women's football report. And with it today, I wanted to take a chance and highlight a pretty successful Canadian news story that happened while we were on our holiday hiatus. And that was the fact that we saw 3 Canadians drafted in the NWSL draft this year, considering last year we had 1. 2 years ago, we had zilch. It's the most since 2018. Canadian international Zoe Burns, already with 2 caps to her credit, gets taken by the Utah Royals out of USC. Of course, 29th overall, Amanda West, another player who is absolutely no stranger to the Canadian international setup. 50 goals and 31 assists in 75 games with Pittsburgh. She goes 36 to the Houston Dash. And the third and final Canadian that was taken, Maya Jones from Memphis, the 2023 AAC Offensive Player of the Year and 4-time AAC All-Star, was picked 42nd by the San Diego Wave, where if she can crack a roster spot, she will be joining Kaylin Sheridan out west. We talked yesterday about the path, the decision for some to go straight to pro and sort of forego the bulk of the college experience. We are seeing the next crop of Canadians try their luck in the NWSL, and we congratulate the 3 on having their names called at the NWSL draft. Our Visa Soccer Report, or Women's Soccer Report, brought to you by Visa. As always, we thank them for that. And before we say goodbye today, we have just time for our Tony Bet top picks. Soccer Lines presented by Tony Bet. Yesterday, gentlemen, we were focused on the FA Cup. We're going to go international today, if we may. And let's start with a very, very fascinating international friendly coming up. Honduras and Iceland. Honduras at plus 225. The underdogs, Ollie. We've seen plenty of the Hondurans the past few years. Do you think they have an upset up their sleeves against the Icelanders?
Honduras against Iceland in Miami. Can't miss this one if you're in the area. Iceland love a CONCACAF friendly in January. I remember they played Canada a couple of years ago. I'll go with Honduras just because I think the price is pretty good on them. Obviously won't be first choice squads with some players playing club football, but I think Honduras on their home continental soil at least can take care of Iceland. And as an underdog, I like them.
Jordo, Iceland's at plus 125. The draw is pretty juicy at plus 210, but do you side with Ollie on a Honduran win?
You know what? I see where Ollie's going with this, but I'm actually going with the draw at plus 210. I think that you look at this match, maybe it can end that way. It's just, you know what? Throw caution to the wind. I think sometimes you just have a hunch. This is my hunch. A nice little draw, a little 1-1 draw, baby.
Scandinavian bias from
Scandinavian bias and a draw.
Danish
hunch.
league.
Very sexy pick from Jordan Wilson. To Liga MX, Club Leon and Tigres plus 145 for Leon. Tigres plus 175. Jordo, what's your hunch on this one?
Hunch is Tigres for sure at plus 175. Solid squad. I see them.
Firmly a Moscato bias. I'm not mad about it.
Yeah, it's a tough one to pick. They're both good teams. Leon weren't great in the Apertura, but traditionally over the past few years have been pretty good, and they're at home. However, Tigres, like, if you can get them as an underdog, I don't think that will probably happen that often. So I'm with Jordan on this one. I'll take Tigres.
Should have asked Tommy Wheeldon Jr. this one. We're going to go back for the FA Cup for our last one. Everton minus 102 favorites hosting Crystal Palace at plus 290, Ollie.
Everton have been good. They're dealing with a lot of adversity off the pitch with the points deduction they've already had, and now speculation that they might get another one. So it's been tough for them, but I'll take Everton.
Jordan.
I'm going to back and go with Everton as well.
Coward. You're sucking up to Tommy Wheeldon Jr., who so graciously joined us today. We thank him for stopping by. We thank Jordan Wilson and Oliver Platt as well for another episode of One Soccer Today. We'll see you tomorrow for more.